For 11 months, Marcus Chen refused to touch the eastern wall of the Alderton Cathedral. Every contractor, every architect, every city official called him paranoid, obsessive, impossible to work with. Victoria Hayes, the 29-year-old CEO of Hayes Heritage Restoration, fired him on a Tuesday morning in front of 40 witnesses. 3 days later, when the wall finally came down the way Marcus said it would, they found what had been hidden inside since 1424. By then, Marcus was gone, and Victoria Hayes was standing in the ruins of her company, holding the one piece of paper that explained everything. Marcus Chen was 34 years old, and he had the kind of life that didn't leave room for mistakes. He woke at 5:30 every morning, made coffee in the same chipped mug, checked on his daughter, and drove to whatever historical site was paying him that month. His wife Sarah had died in a car accident 2 years earlier when Emma was 4. The medical bills had been extensive. The grief had been worse. Marcus paid the bills slowly and raised his daughter quietly, and did not talk about the parts of his life that hurt. Emma was 6 years old with dark curls and a stuffed rabbit she called Bishop because her father worked on churches and she thought all rabbits who lived near churches should have church names. She asked questions constantly. She noticed everything. She had her mother's eyes and her father's precision. The Alderton Cathedral was a 14th century structure on the north side of the city, limestone and stained glass, one of 12 remaining buildings from the original medieval settlement. It had survived fires, wars, and 3 centuries of weather. What it had not survived was time. The eastern wall was failing. Cracks had appeared in the foundation. The archway was separating from the load-bearing structure. The city had commissioned Hayes Heritage Restoration to stabilize it before it collapsed. Victoria Hayes had taken over the company 8 months earlier when her father stepped back due to health issues. She was accomplished, decisive, and under enormous pressure to prove she had earned the role rather than inherited it. She moved quickly, she spoke clearly, she did not tolerate delays. Her office on the 3rd floor overlooked the restoration yard where her father had spent 40 years building the company's reputation. She could see it from her desk every morning, a reminder of what she had inherited and what she might lose. Marcus was hired as the senior structural consultant. He arrived on site in October and spent the first week doing nothing visible. He walked the perimeter. He studied the stonework. He pressed his hands against surfaces and closed his eyes. The other contractors called him the Weird One. Victoria called him thorough. Then Marcus submitted his assessment. The eastern wall could not be touched. Not reinforced, not stabilized, not braced. Any intervention would trigger a collapse. The wall needed to be left alone for 6 months while they addressed the foundation from below. Victoria read the report twice. Then she called him to her office. 6 months of inactivity is not an option, she said. We have a schedule. The wall has a different schedule, Marcus said. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. She asked for his reasoning. He explained that the eastern wall was not structurally independent. It was tied to a secondary support system that predated the visible construction, likely medieval-era bracing that had been built into the original framework and then concealed during later renovations. Disturbing the outer wall without understanding the inner structure would remove the only thing holding the building upright. How do you know there's a secondary system? Victoria asked. Because the wall is still standing when it shouldn't be. She hired 2 independent consultants. Both reviewed Marcus's report. Both said the wall could be reinforced with standard methods. The timeline could hold. Marcus said they were wrong. Victoria made her decision. Standard reinforcement. 4-week timeline. Marcus was removed from the active project and reassigned to documentation. He accepted the reassignment without argument, but he did not stop watching the wall. For 11 months, Marcus documented everything. He arrived before dawn on most mornings, coffee in a thermos, notebook in hand. He measured the cracks with calipers accurate to 0.1 millimeters. He recorded temperature variations and how they affected the stone. He photographed the same 12 points on the wall every 3 days, building a time-lapse archive that showed movement invisible to casual observation. On nights when the wind was strong, he drove back to the site and recorded how the wall responded to lateral pressure. He compiled 400 pages of data that no one asked for and no one read. Grace Mendoza, the site foreman who had worked with Marcus on 3 previous restorations, watched him work and said nothing, but she kept copies of everything he gave her. Emma asked him one evening while he read to her why he looked sad. "I'm not sad," he said. "You have the face." "What face?" "The one you make when something is wrong and you can't fix it." He closed the book. "Sometimes grown-ups have to let other people make mistakes." "That sounds bad." "It is." The reinforcement work began in March. Steel braces were installed. Mortar was repointed. The wall held. Victoria called it a success. Marcus called it temporary. On a Tuesday morning in April, Victoria walked onto the site and found Marcus standing at the base of the eastern wall, with his hand pressed flat against the stone. He had been there for 20 minutes. He was not moving. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Listening." "To what?" "The wall." She looked at him for a long moment. The morning sun was behind him, and his shadow fell across the ancient limestone in a way that made him look smaller than he was. Around them, 40 workers had stopped what they were doing. Some were watching openly. Others were pretending not to watch while watching anyway. Victoria felt the weight of their attention and made a decision she would later understand as the worst of her professional life. "Security, remove his access card." Marcus did not argue. He looked at her once, then he looked at the wall. "You have 4 days," he said. "Maybe 5. Leave the site." He left. Emma was waiting at the neighbor's house when he got home early. She saw his face and knew immediately. "Did they fire you because of the wall?" "Yes." "Were you right about the wall?" "I don't know yet." 3 days later, at 6:47 in the morning, the wall moved. Not collapsed. Moved. A 6-inch lateral shift in the upper section, visible to anyone standing in the courtyard. The sound it made was not loud. It was a low grinding, stone against stone, the sound of something ancient giving way. The reinforcement braces held, but something underneath them did not. Workers began backing away before anyone gave the order. Victoria was on site within 15 minutes. The structural team confirmed what the movement implied. The inner support system Marcus had warned about was failing. The braces had accelerated the failure by transferring load to points that were never designed to bear it. She asked how long they had. No one could say for certain. She called Marcus. He did not answer. She drove to his apartment. Emma opened the door, holding Bishop by one ear. "Is your dad home?" "He's in the back room. He said he's not talking to work people." Victoria stood in the doorway. "Can you tell him I need his help?" Emma studied her with the frank assessment of a 6-year-old. "Did you say sorry yet?" "Not yet." "You should start with that." Marcus came to the door. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had been waiting for this call and had not wanted to be right. "The wall moved," Victoria said. "I know." "How do you know?" "I've been monitoring the seismic sensors for 3 months. I installed them before you took my access card." She was quiet. "I need you to come back." "Why?" "Because no one else understands what's happening. I told you what was happening in October." "I know." She paused. "I'm sorry. I didn't listen. I should have." He looked at her for a moment. Then he looked at Emma. "I'll be back before dinner." "With ice cream?" "With ice cream." The site was quiet when they arrived. The crew was standing at a distance. The wall was visibly unstable now, a hairline separation running from foundation to roofline. Marcus walked the perimeter slowly. He studied the movement pattern. Then he crouched at the base and pressed his ear against the stone. "There's a void," he said, "approximately 4 feet behind the outer wall. It runs the full height of the structure." "A construction gap?" "No, a chamber." He explained it carefully. Medieval builders sometimes created intentional voids within walls, spaces used for storage, defense, or religious purposes. The chamber had its own support system, independent of the outer wall. When Hayes Restoration installed the braces, they had unknowingly transferred load onto that internal structure. The internal structure was now failing. "If we remove the braces," Victoria said, "the outer wall collapses." "Yes." "If we leave the braces, the inner chamber collapses." "Yes." "What do we do?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. We document what's inside before it's gone. The decision to open the wall came from the City Preservation Board. Controlled demolition of a 6-foot section, minimal disturbance, full archaeological oversight. Marcus supervised. The work took 11 hours. They removed stone by hand, piece by piece, exposing the void incrementally. By late afternoon, the opening was large enough to see through. Marcus shone a flashlight into the darkness and saw the outline of something that should not have been there. At 7:23 in the evening, they broke through. The chamber was narrow, 8 feet tall, accessible by a concealed stairway that had been sealed in 1424 according to the date carved above the entrance. The air inside was cold and dry, preserved by the limestone. Inside were 14 wooden crates and a lead-sealed container. Dust hung in the flashlight beams like suspended time. The crates held manuscripts, religious texts, architectural drawings, records of land ownership from the early 15th century, documents that had been hidden during a period of political upheaval and never recovered. The ink was still legible, the parchment was intact, 600 years of history, waiting. The lead container held something else. A reliquary, gold and gemstones, identified later as the lost St. Catherine reliquary, missing since 1424, valued conservatively at $18 million. But the value was not in the gold. It was in the history, in the proof of what had been thought lost, in the architectural record that rewrote the understanding of medieval construction in the region. Victoria stood in the chamber holding a 600-year-old drawing of the building she had almost destroyed. Her hands were shaking slightly, though she tried to keep them steady. Marcus was sitting on a stone block nearby, head in his hands, not celebrating, just breathing. "How did you know?" she asked quietly. "I didn't, but the wall wasn't holding itself up. Something was, and old builders didn't waste effort. If they built something that precise, they built it for a reason." The board meeting was held 2 weeks later. Marcus was offered the position of Chief Preservation Architect for Hayes Heritage, full authority over all structural assessments, with a policy change requiring that any senior consultant's objection would halt work pending independent review. He negotiated one additional term, a scholarship fund in Sarah's name for children of tradespeople pursuing degrees in architecture or engineering. Victoria agreed to everything. Emma asked him that night at dinner if he was famous now. "No, but you found the treasure. I found what someone else hid a long time ago. Are you happy?" He thought about it. "I'm less worried." She accepted this. "Can Bishop come to work with you sometime?" Bishop can come to work. The Alderton Cathedral reopened 8 months later. The eastern wall was preserved exactly as it had stood, with the chamber sealed behind reinforced glass, visible to the public. A placard described the discovery and the 11 months of documentation that made recovery possible. Marcus's name was listed. So was Sarah's, and at the bottom, in smaller text, "Sometimes the right answer is to wait and listen." Marcus kept the morning routine, the coffee, the daughter, the quiet. He did not become different. He became settled. One evening, Emma asked why he had known to wait. "Because your mom taught me something," he said. "She used to say that old things have their own language. You just have to be quiet enough to hear it." Emma held Bishop a little tighter. "I think she was right. I know she was.